find out what we can accomplish. We're here tonight for just a special meeting about the budget, and we're going to receive an update from Donna and Kelly. If you have anybody really, if anybody has anything to add from the city, we invite anybody to chime in at any time and speak. And I believe we have at least one person that may want to speak to us this evening. So before we do that, and then our second item is we have an executive session, so we'll allow some time for that too at the evening before we move into our 7 o'clock meeting. So Donna, we'll turn it over to you. As you get set up and ready, we'll let you give some presentations and as we move forward.
I'm telling you, the Bluetooth in here has been wonky today. We may have to go
just
old school.
Go for it.
Just tell me when to click.
The first couple are the same as you got during the session last Thursday. I just kind of reiterated what we had went over. Each meal equals $138,708. This was a 5.8 increase over November's final valuation. So each meal in that increased by $8,911. The revenue neutral rate quoted to us by the county clerk was 58.488. As you know, because our mill levy went up, then this will go down. It generates the same amount of tax monies that we generated last year with this year's valuation. That's where he got that from. And this would be a loss of 4 meals or $556,000 for us. Now, what we brought to you on Thursday was the high level, was the 12 meals, and it ended up with the 5%. And you asked us to come back with some cuts in there and see if we can get it down. Keep the 5%, hopefully, and do a 7 or 8. So what I did was go over, these are the increases that I've handed out to you before. I show what, and this is, I gave you these pages so you can see it a little better, and what each of the mill levy, what each thing cost at the mill levy coin, so to speak. And then what cuts that we came up with. We did do half of the staff that the fire chief was requesting. We did 3. And then we cut the environmental inspector. And we cut street materials by $25,000. They were at $75,000. And then equipment reserve, everybody who increased their equipment reserve, we took it all back down to 0, which we'll have to make up in coming years because the cost of all the equipment is going up. And fire has a hole in a few years that we're going to have to fill as well in their MER, or Municipal Equipment Reserve Fund. Then we had $25,000 for demolition, and we upped that to $75,000 because we have a lot of homes that need demoed, and we end up paying that. But we did back that off by $50,000. And then our new park equipment reserve plan, we backed that off by $25,000. So there's only going to be $25,000 going forward. And then we did cut the senior center for $20,000. That's where we came up with some cuts. You can veto these cuts. You can talk about something you had an idea. This is where we came up with, and it was about $526,000. So the next slide, this shows you with 7 meals, it came in at 4.5% reserve with those cuts. And I just kind of put the little chicken scratchings next to it so you kind of see what I did. We ended up with $1 million, I can't read it, 79, I think it is.
$1,076,583.
76.
Yeah.
And then if you go to the next page, please, with an 8 meal, we got to the 5% reserve with $1.2 million with those same cuts.
And as a reminder for the benefit of the public who might not have watched our previous few work sessions, this does also include $800,000 in the ARPA funds, as well as to help plug that $1 million+ hole in the general fund.
And then I'll just keep going, but you stop me if you have questions. The next one is what we have to decide tonight. This is my revenue neutral rate intent that we have to decide. And the hearings are going to be both on the same night, and it'll be August 23rd is the first time we can have it with one of our meetings at 7 o'clock. We'll have the revenue neutral rate hearing first, and then we'll have the budget hearing after that. And there's certain protocol that we have to follow in each of those to get it done correctly. The next one is I wanted to show you whatever we go up in the general fund, the other 4 levy funds stay the same. So if you would go with the 8, it would be 53.806 for general, and then the total down there would be 70.506.
Now, do you have these up here? Am I missing them?
This is what I've given you before.
Yeah, out of this.
Yeah,
Right, okay.
yeah, it's not changed.
Okay.
And then, one more I think I have in there. You'd asked me kind of to see what 24 would look like if we go with this plan. And what I did in 24 was stay with the same mill levy. If we go up 8 is what I have in here. And I added back in the 3 new officers that we need to make it 6 for the fire. And then each of the equipment reserves, I added that back in for what it should be, what they wanted this year. I put it in for 24. And then I did not include any ARPA funds because there will be none. So this is what you can see will be, my best guess would be 602,000 in the negative for 24. But this, when you do, I've told you before, when you do forecasts like this, you take the human element out, and you're just increasing everything. So it is the worst case. But I wanted you to kind of get an idea of what it might look like for 2024. And I think that's all of them. I can't remember. Okay.
We'll leave it up and we can go back later.
So that was quick.
Want to know, we've presented this information several times already, so the direction you had given us, just as Donna mentioned when we started the conversation this evening, was to please figure out a way to cut a combination of items to the best of our ability while still maintaining the services that we need and must provide to our public. And we wanted to maintain that 5% minimum in the reserve, although our policy is we should not go below 15%. We can, on an occasion, it's okay to do that. However, it's definitely not the best practice. And, you know, it's kind of, I believe one of the commissioners talked the other day about, it's kind of like when you're living out of your savings account. It is not sustainable. So we've been fortunate that we were able to go 5 years through very careful strategic budgeting and planning and policy direction from you all without changing the mill levy. So, but because of that, and because mostly what's eating your lunch right now is same thing for everybody. It's commodities, it's supplies, it's fuel, and you know, our best crystal ball guess on those things going forward is going to be incredibly difficult. But and we've just been, you know, doing less with less, because at some point we have the same amount of money and we just have to purchase less materials. So we can do lesser work, such as, you know, streets and sidewalks and those kinds of things. So in combination with that, we went down from 12 to 8. And as Donna mentioned, we're going to have to be very careful about things like the MERS, the Municipal Equipment Reserve, because we're depending on that, you know, for not just next year, but 6-7 years down the road, because that's what helps us replace vehicles and equipment without having to borrow and pay a much higher interest rate on lease purchase type items. So.
You know, Donna, or do you have an estimate on where we'll end with the reserve this year? You think, I mean, we have it projected for 11%.
And I'm hoping that stays there.
Okay.
The only way it would not is this is if we spent every dime in our budget
Okay.
that we have projected, and we got all our money.
Yeah,
But we have to make sure we get our revenue in before we spend all this.
yeah.
That's what I project as being the low for 2022.
Okay.
But we just, like, we're going to probably cut off spending in December 1st. I mean, we got to figure out where we are at year end. We cannot go any lower. Yeah.
Well, obviously, the $602,000 in the hole projected for '24 should give us all heartburn, but
And that's, projecting, I don't know what the interest rates are going to be. Maybe we'll be flushing interest again, but it doesn't look like that. But, there's things like that I just can't project. So I go with the low end on some of that stuff. So it could be different, could be a little better. If we get some more property on the tax rolls, the valuation, the forecast is, if you remember, was done for me by Wichita University, and they kind of take a slope type formula look at all the prior years, so it just goes up a little, what it looks like as an average. So, and that's something that could help us out, is another increase or something like that.
Well, it's one thing when you're going along and you had the long-range projection of the small gradual increases, and then you had the dramatic drop, but they're still saying the small gradual increases on the way back. So that should work in our favor down the road. So it is ugly to see that big of a number in an out year, but we have to deal with this coming year also.
Kelly, can you talk about the tax exempt documents that you sent us?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
where the taxing year here for the second line item is 22, and the year increase realized is 23, and that's at $333,000.
Correct.
But what other amounts are we going to take away from that when it comes to the tax exempt properties? Can you just talk some about that?
Sure, yeah. So one of the questions you all ask us every year is for things that are either exempt. So obviously, we're going to have quite a percentage of the property that is permanently exempt. That's going to be the school district, the hospitals, churches, obviously city property, county property, they're permanently exempt. They aren't going to come back on the rolls, to your point, sir. And then there are several different types of exemptions that in partnership with the county and the school district that we award. Some of them are economic development related, such as we talk sometimes about a business will ask for a property tax abatement for, 5 or 10 years. Another one that we issue on an ongoing basis is the Neighborhood Revitalization Program. We call it the NRP. And that is where someone purchases a home or spends about, a certain amount of money to make improvements to the home, and they have to be substantial improvements. It's like, it can't be like, oh, you have ugly shag carpeting, we need to replace it. It has to be substantial things, weatherization, things like roofs, windows, doors, HVAC units, bigger items. The property does go up in its tax appraisal after those improvements are made, and the homeowner pays that amount of money in, but then they're rebated back a portion of that payment for a set period of years. Typically with residential properties, we see this more, and they're usually smaller increments. So to your point, sir, it might be good to remind everybody that in Kansas, you collect your taxes a year in arrears. So right now, the taxes we're collecting this year were actually for taxing year 2021. Make sense? So we had a list of properties. The county graciously provided me that list, and then we sorted through, and then I pulled out just Newton's valuation of those portions. This year it's pretty slim. We got about 8,000 and some change total coming back on in additional revenue. So, but some the outer years are larger. Commissioner Kane's point, in 23, we will have about $333,000, our portion, the city's portion, come as revenue, additional revenue. Most of that is attributed to the sale of Hangar W this year at the airport, because it was owned jointly by owned by the city and county and the county's PBC, their Public Building Commission. But it has since sold to a private entity, you may recall, and so we will collect that next year. And in fact, we'll only probably get about half of that because it's sold about the middle of the year. Does that make sense? So that's why you have that larger amount. The other upcoming years, there really are a handful of larger ones, but most of them are pretty incremental from the city's perspective. And I did mention, some of those permanently exempt properties. I know we talk about this a lot, but it's over 30% of properties within the Newton city limits are permanently exempt. So we've got 65% of our taxing base helping support these services, and that's what funds the general fund. And those are the services like, it's everything from the genuine services, not the utility. So it's not the airport, not Meridian Center, not the golf course. Those things are all separate. It is genuine services such as parks and recreation, public works, street, water, water and wastewater, yes, are there. Yeah, they're not part of this, sorry, they're their own utility. But it would be fire and EMS and police. Those are the big ones. And then, of course, administration is, we are people, we are a service industry. That's always going to be a large cost for us, just across the board as personal services. Is that helpful to your question, sir?
Yes, it is. So which means we might realize 160,000 of it by the end of next year.
That would be my hope.
That might help fill that 602,000. But
It does help.
It's
Every
a little
bit
bit.
helps.
It's a little bit.
We'll take the $8,000 this year. Every little bit helps. And you may recall when we issue those tax abatements, or when we receive those requests for them, that is why we always do a return on investment. We look at the number of jobs they're creating. We look at what's the value of the building improvement and their cost to purchase the land. Then there's those residual things like those people are going to work here. They're going to go out to lunch. They're going to buy fuel here. They're going to buy groceries, even if they don't live here, or they're going to rent or buy a place here in town. So we take all of that into account, and we always look for that positive ROI, return on investment, before you consider especially larger tax abatements that might last 5, 7, 10 years. You all established that policy about 5 years ago that we would not issue those without, that return on investment study from the economists at Wichita State.
So on this exemption topic, then in '24, we only realized 30,000, in '25, only 1,200, and then in '26, there's 119,000 that will come back onto the rolls. But yeah, that's way out there already.
We're trying to look 10 years out, at least what you guys always ask us to do, whether it's expenses, revenues. We try to look as far out as we can. And disclaimer, I think I put this in my message to you, this was based on the current mill levy. So as the mill levy changes over time, these amounts could increase or decrease respectively. But I just held it the same all 10 years across, just so you could have a feel. And then, so you have that cover page. On the pages behind was a listing of everything and what category it fell into by year, just in case you wanted to dig into that a little bit, if you were curious. And we're grateful for those people who participate in the NRP. We want those people to invest in our older homes, especially in town.
Would you like to come and speak to us this evening, or are you just here to listen and observe? Yeah, you. I'm sorry, I don't know your name. I didn't get a chance to say hi before we started. Would you like to come and speak to us this evening, or are you just here to observe and listen? Okay, you can come up to the podium, and if you just state your name and address for us, we'll be glad to hear you this evening.
Good evening. My name is Byron, last name Reuter. I live at 459 Sherman Place. I've been there since 1987, and I'm kind of a numbers person, and I've been tracking the mill levy since, well, actually since 87, but I changed it and started over in 92 because we changed the way we fund public schools in 92. I have a one-page document I would love to share with each of the commissioners.
Sure.
If I might approach and
Yeah.
okay, sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I think the clerk needs one as well.
Sure.
Thank you.
I'm not a history teacher, but I think graphs speak loudly compared to looking at a list of numbers, data. And this is just for perspective only, and thank you for giving me the time to share this. From 1992 to about 2005, you can see that the mill levy had kind of a zigzag, stable, horizontal trend to it. And then some of you might, if you were here in '05, remember we had the 1 cent sales tax increase in exchange for a mill levy drop, and you can see that it dropped precipitously there in '06. And then beginning with about 2010, we were kind of back where we were, the previous decade. And then from 2010, there's a marked change in how the mill levy was finally determined compared to the first half of the graph. And I thought this graph was just good perspective for us to look at. sometimes we can change direction based on what we see in the rearview mirror. And that was really all I wanted to do is share the history of how that's worked out. And by the way, these mill levy numbers are the combined mill levy components of, all the parts that make the total mill levy on the property tax assessment, in December. So it's I presented this morning to the Harvey County commissioners, and they gave me a graph that showed that they've been level all 20 years since the turn of the millennium. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Just curious, in 2005 and 2006, I think I was running around Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, but wondering when the 1 cent sales tax came on, why was it dropped?
That was because that was offered to the citizens. If you pass the sales tax, we can lower the mill levy.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair.
Is that not correct?
I think I remember
A
the
portion of
discussion
it
now.
went to offset, a portion of
Yeah.
it.
That was kind of part of the discussion last week was, could we leverage
Do
a
that
sales
again.
tax?
An additional sales tax.
Yeah.
Well,
Also,
just-
when presented with a graph like this, my question to you is, what would have made this a very nice surprise? If you present a graph like this and then say, and by the way, I've got a $2 million bonus here that I'd like to share with you that city can help lower this. That's not forthcoming from you? Well, thank you for this information. It is quite stark, isn't it?
Because city staff presented us the same chart last week for the city portion of the mill.
Just city portion.
So,
Yeah, and to the gentleman's point, that's a great point to make, is that, remember, the taxing entities for the three major ones, of course, are us, the city, and then the county, and the school district, and then there are some smaller taxing entities, the townships, for example, or in some of the other communities, there are fire districts. We don't have a fire district here, but if you just the good rule of thumb is when you're looking at any property valuation, Vice Mayor, looking at the chart, we were just talking about the mill levy valuations and Newton's portion of that. The rule of thumb is if you look at the total valuation of any given property that is not tax exempt, the city receives about a third of it. I think the school district and the county are kind of close in there too. And like I said, there's smaller slivers of the pie depending on which part of the county or outlying areas they are. But it's just kind of a good rule of thumb that we're about a third, is a general rule of thumb, of the mill levy is ours.
Just one of the things, and I don't know if maybe this isn't even the evening to talk about it, and if it's not, that's okay. First, I want to acknowledge the cuts, and I appreciate that. I think that took some work. You guys did exactly what we asked. But looking at, like we've talked, some of what our increase in budget is the development and what's happening in the city and the city growing. And for instance, the industrial park, we know that Spencer Road has some issues. That's on the project list at some point. And at one point, somebody mentioned, and I'm not proposing anything tonight, but somebody mentioned that we can have special taxing districts for sales tax. Does that have to be done now? Can that be done at any time in the future if we wanted to incorporate that? Like if we had if obviously the industrial park and we're wanting GAF to continue to move forward and the Lou Rebello situation out there and Benjamin Franklin, those are all going to take some city expenses. And since no one necessarily lives in the industrial park, I'm just going to say that if we had a half a cent or 1 cent sales tax in that specific area, maybe that's not even how we do it. I'm just saying, is that something that can be discussed at any time throughout the year to help offset some of those costs, and we're not putting them on the citizens of the city? One thing I think is that most of what happens at the industrial park leaves the city of Newton as far as equipment that's built and
product
manufactured. And that would take some of the taxing burden off the citizens and put it on the end user of those products. So
Yes, sir. So to your point, there are actually several programs that are allowable by state statute. So one of them that's typically used more for commercial is called a CID, a Community Improvement District. Let me just use the outlet mall is a great example, right? So somewhere where you're going to sell products and there's goods and services, whether it's food or retail. I'm not picking on them. I'm just using them as an example.
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
The district, basically, you all would pass an ordinance, and usually it is in partnership with the property owner. You typically, it can be contested if you try to put it on for them without their permission and blessing. Doesn't necessarily have to be that way. There are some statutory allowances for those kinds of things, but basically you all would pass an ordinance that would set the district boundaries. So let's say the outlet mall, if you were looking at it from above, we would just set the district as the piece of property that is the outlet mall. And you can typically set it on a CID, I think the maximum is 20 years, and I think it can either be a property tax or a sales tax, and a maximum of 2% not to exceed the 20 years total. And so basically, if you buy a good or service there, if it was a sales tax, if you bought a good or service at the outlet mall, they would just charge that additional 2% tax, they would pay it in as normal, but then it comes back not to the city, it comes back to the property owner and pays for the improvements made there. So typically, they spend the money up front. Now, there are other options. That's just a CID. There's, I mean, we talk about TIFs a lot, like tax increment financing. That's typically used a little more often in industrial cases, but there are statutory requirements that can only be for certain things. It has to meet certain qualifications. So, but we can do that at any point in the time at any given property's request. The last one we did, the CID, I recall, was Holiday Inn Express, I believe, about 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And they elected to do the additional sales tax, I believe. And that was helping to pay, they had to upgrade, after the hotel sold, it needed to be rebranded, and their flag, Holiday Inns, had rebranded all the internal things, like all the carpeting and all the, they have to maintain their brand, they had to upgrade to match the rest of the chain. And so they came to us and asked for a CID, and you guys graciously approved that for them. So, and it's definitely helped them pay for those improvements over time. So yeah, there are options, and I'd be happy to get you a more in-depth list of all of those options.
I think it would be helpful to help alleviate some of the burden. I recognize that we have, everyone's paying more at the pump, everyone's paying more at the grocery stores. We're paying more when we go out to eat, and the city's paying more when we purchase anything, a service or a good. And it seems like everything that we provide, we purchase, and we distribute it somehow, whether it be street materials or traffic signals or a service that we provide in the form of firefighters or police officers, and they're being paid more as well. And so I still would like to see us be around 5.5% or 5.5 mils. I think that most people have experienced, I think everyone has experienced an increase, and everyone has had to figure out how to spend less and trying to save as much as possible. And so I acknowledge the work that's been done. I mean, that's huge. I mean, over $500,000 to the proposed increase budget. And I don't know that I have a magic 8 ball in front of me, but I would still like to see us be around 5.5 mils. So I was just wondering about alternative funding options to make up that difference, and I think it would be something worthy this year of looking into. Is I hope what we can do in this next year is spend more time looking through some of our challenges that lie ahead of us. So,
Definitely,
yeah.
And we did, I believe one of the commissioners alluded to, we've talked, well, you did, sir. We talked about what are the other potential revenue streams, right? The best thing we can do is diversify as much as possible.
Yeah.
And, Donna mentioned we kind of took a real big hit to the belt in our interest income the last couple of years. I mean, we were making $500,000 a year on that, and last year I think we made $4,000. Just because interest rates are so low. So, I mean, it helped us in some ways because we were able to refinance a lot of our existing debt and get a much better interest rate. We have over $2.6 million in savings over the last 2 years by refinancing existing debt, and we did not extend the term of any of that debt. So we're pretty proud of that. But to your point, we've look at another sales tax option. It may be citywide. It may be just a portion of the city, like you said, like a CID. But if it is citywide, remember that's going to be a referendum. It will have to go to a vote of the people. So and that's going to take some time. I know it's not the magic 8 ball and the magic fix for next year, but I don't know, we've talked about this before, but I don't know how many people have followed along with our other budget meetings. So I don't want to sound repetitive, but I think it's important to have that
And just for
information.
the record, it'd be important to note for those who are watching or may watch later, is that we do not have any of those options on the table. There is nothing to discuss in the future right now
Yeah.
as far as a sales tax increase or nothing like
Yeah,
that. I
we're
think that's
just
just
looking
important to
for
note. We're
options in the future.
thinking, and for those watching, sometimes I feel like I need to look at the camera when we say these things, but we would love, I mean, if there's other people have ideas, we would love to hear them as well, so.
Now, when it comes to certain districts, let's just say it's the KLP, does that go to a referendum or a vote for the people? Or just certain districts, can that be the 5 of us?
It depends on the program. Statutorily, some of them, you all can make those decisions. Like for a CID for the Community Improvement District, you all just make that decision in partnership with the property owner or owners. For example, I know a lot of downtowns, we're very proud that we've recently been named a Main Street community, and so that will help us with resources for our downtown property owners and merchants. And a lot of communities will put a CID across their entire downtown district, and that helps with things like facade programs, but again, you're paying that little bit of extra when you go buy your coffee or your pastry or your clothing or whatever in that particular district. So you all could make that decision. Typically, when there's more than one property owner involved, it takes like a 51% kind of, not necessarily a petition, but we like to see at least 51% of the property owners. Just like when they come and petition you to pave a street or spread it as specials, we always need at least half, if not more, of the property owners on board. So
And that money goes directly back to those property owners.
remember, yeah, so it doesn't necessarily
come
help
to
us, but it would help with things like again, I'm just using examples like downtown facade programs. That's a very common one that a lot of communities offer through their Main Street program.
I know in the past, we had a fairly aggressive equipment refresh. We had really worked to start to refresh vehicles and equipment sooner while there was still value to the equipment, and it could be traded in, and then we could leverage those trade-in values on the new equipments and such.
That-
This is not the market to be buying equipment and
Yeah.
everything.
Well, that
So
kind of
maybe
went out the window the last few years. We have had to change our cars to go 6, 7 years for police instead of the 5 we used
Right.
to do, so.
And that has to be part of the discussion. I mean,
Absolutely.
I'm not going to buy a vehicle unless my vehicle completely betrays me, and I baby her every day and everything. So, I mean, that needs to be part of the discussion. Maybe we need to eke another year or two out of some of that, or some of
Yeah.
offices and carpets and refurb painting
Sure.
and such. And I just need to know that discussion has been had within the individual major departments.
Absolutely.
As well as within administration as well.
Absolutely, absolutely, and
We
that
did
is
our-
something, yeah.
Our slurry truck, for instance.
Yeah.
Man, that-
All of our equipment, we try and stretch it as far as we can. And certainly, right now, we're having to do that because you can't get things that you need. We don't try to trade them off just because this is the 10th year or the
Right.
15th year. If it's doing well, and our mechanics will look it over, and they will make a decision along with whoever the supervisors are and the department heads, and we make a decision based on how that vehicle is performing, because everyone's different.
Right. And it just needs to be part of the conversation, looking at 24 and 25, that,
Absolutely, yes.
hey, we need to keep this going just a little bit longer and let the market come
Well,
back and
yeah,
help
supply
us
chain
out.
is
Exactly.
a big issue as well. I mean, I don't want to pick on PD, but if Chief wouldn't mind to help me get these statistics right. Our order for interceptors in 20 and 21 both got canceled because we couldn't even get the vehicles.
Right, but it's not
And
just,
then when we could get them, the cost now was about $38,000, and I think the same vehicle is now 60-something.
But
And
it's
that's
not-
prior to outfitting it.
it's not just swinging for the fences and going after the big guys and.
No, I know. I'm just using them as an example.
That's the easy ones. Those are the ones that you end up putting emotion behind because you're like, oh, somebody wants to get rid of PD cars, or somebody doesn't want to get a new fire engine, or we don't want to fund half of our new positions for the fire department. But it goes even deeper than that. It's like, you know what, maybe those laptops need to go another year, another 2 years before they get refreshed and everything. And those are the conversations that have to be had. We've had a lot of conversations about how to increase the revenue and everything. We haven't had so many about how to decrease the spending. So,
Well, we kind of have had those internal.
We have, yeah.
internal.
Those
Yes.
haven't
With
been
us.
shared with
Those
us.
haven't been shared. Our
Right.
community needs to know the struggle that's been had about these
Right.
conversations and how we're going to cap the spending in the future. Because when you see, and we know that there's parts of our spending that are going to go up because of the what's happening out in the world and such. But there's parts of it that we can control. We can control whether or not we're going to buy something. And it might hurt. Maybe we need to change how we do stuff. Maybe we are doing things at a gold standard that maybe we need to consider for the next 5 years, operating some things at a silver standard. I think our community would understand if they saw the benefit of trying to keep those mill levies low. I mean, you know, if they have to walk into a lobby that doesn't have a new floor, but they know that it saved them
You
some
don't
money.
like our Santa Fe Railroad headquarter tile out front? Is that what you're
Actually, I do. I love
Oh,
it.
I actually do think that.
I was thinking
I'm
of
just-
that one
I'm
hall
teasing,
that
yeah.
had the purple glue on the floor or
Oh,
something there
yes.
for, it was striking when you came up the stairs. I was like, we didn't put purple carpet in, did we? So, but
But notice we only did one
we
hallway
need to know
into
that
the
those
building, yeah.
conversations were had, and the
Yeah,
public
of course.
definitely needs to know.
Of course, absolutely. We do our very, very best, and, you know, we love our community very much, too. And to your point, we've all had to make those same sacrifices in our personal lives lately, too, so
Yeah.
I understand.
So oh, Catherine, did you have something? Or you-
No,
Okay.
I'm talking to myself. I'm sorry. I'm listening and talking.
So tonight, we need to,
Yeah.
we're
so-
just receiving, or are we approving anything tonight?
We have to, you have to tell me what to do on the revenue neutral rate, because I have to
that's what
turn it into the county clerk.
And then, once the clerk receives that from us, he will, for all the taxing entities, not just us, he will send out a notice to every property owner with the proposed taxing rate, and then it will also list the dates and times of these hearings so that they can come out and, you know, speak should they so desire.
He will break it down to tell that each property owner what it's going to cost them.
Yeah, like this portion of your bill,
Okay.
again, your taxes are $300, for example, for a year. 100 of that's the city, 100 of that's the county, 100 of it's the school district. Like, it'll be broken down for every single property owner.
So you need the not to exceed rate tonight.
Correct.
I need to put in there, like last year, we put in 62.535 because we were staying where we were. So I need to put in 62 plus whatever we're going to go up.
Oh, okay.
How much higher did the assessed values come back than we were working off of when we were setting the budget last year? So when we set the revenue neutral rate, we were operating off of an estimated.
Yeah, 2% increase is what we estimated,
And
and it came in at 1.
At 1, okay. So that's what we need to be aware of as well.
Yes, absolutely. And then this year, we were operating initially, when we brought you the initial budget, we were operating off of about a 4, because we figured with it being so low last year in valuation increase, we were hoping it would go up a little more, and we're at 5, we got 5.8% instead. And remember, those are all set by the county appraiser's office and assessor. We just are the recipient of that.
And that won't change, or the last?
That is already set.
It could,
It won't
it can
change.
usually
It's
go
not going
up
to
a
change a
little
lot,
bit.
but it changes.
It can change.
It will
This is not
a little
written in stone by any means.
But
I
again,
have,
that's
I've
we're at
only
the
seen it
mercy
go
of the
down
county.
once
So,
in November. Usually it's close to the same or just a little tick up.
so when you say it came in at 1, that was the final was
That was
1?
it.
Okay.
We were estimating 2, and it came in at 1.
Right, so,
And so we were estimating 4 this year, and the initial, the estimate right now is 5.8%. And Donna mentioned it, typically it goes up or down slightly, but not as much. But we won't know that until November.
Everything we do for budgets, we do them so early, and we do it all on estimations, so it is difficult.
And we're doing this early because of this revenue neutral rate.
Correct.
Hearing, is that correct? So maybe
Correct.
it's just,
Statutory.
it's fair to say that this is a very convoluted process, and it's really hard to set a budget when you don't actually know how much money you're making.
and I hate to beat a dead horse. Did it go down a full percentage point from a 2.0 to a 1.0?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
thanks for, I live in detail. I just need to-
Absolutely. Yep. So-
Is that-
Yeah, I would like to see us
I'm glad you did,
publish, I would like to see us publish amount that, I know at one point we talked about 12 mills. I would like to see us publish something that's, I mean, I don't know if there's interest in being at 12, or if we're kind of settled on 8, or what is kind of our high, I mean, I would like to see us not shoot for the moon, but kind of be more realistic, because if that's what we're going to publish to the community, that's what they're going to see.
I'm willing to go to the 8 mills. I'm still looking at the following year, and we're still going to have to make some more cuts. Even at 8 mills, for next year's budget, we're still going to have to make cuts, because that 600,000 being in the hole, it's not going to work.
Actually, it's a $1.8 million deficit.
Well,
to go from that we're going to end up at 602, the balance, so we're going from 1.2 to 6.
I understand, and that's unacceptable. We can't do that. So
Yeah.
even
By law,
at
we
8
cannot.
is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have some hard work ahead of us.
We're willing to work hard.
We are.
Get that.
And I know everybody here is willing to work hard, and so
Everybody has worked hard.
absolutely.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that.
And this is the highest, this is the ceiling. So if somebody would give us $2 million in between now and August, we could say, hey,
Well, and
don't have to
that's
do
just
that.
it.
Here's your
This-
chance.
This is the not to exceed. So this
Yeah.
gives the departments and potential windfall on revenue, crooked pencils in departments deciding
we'll look
to
over all our numbers again.
adjust equipment refreshes and everything. So this is just setting the not to exceed. So-
I mean,
This is
we've
the
all
thing.
done that already.
Right.
So we're
Until we
confident in our
publish it,
numbers,
we can
but
keep-
I want to do it all again, just to make sure
Yeah.
I've made no errors, anything like that.
And an
We've
8
checked everything.
Yeah,
An 8 mil would, on a $100,000 house, would be about $92 a year
total.
total increase.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Tell me which charts you want me to pull up. I don't know if that one is in here.
No, that's okay.
That one was in last week's. and
Yeah, but
everything.
tell me if you want me to change. I've got 8 mills pulled up here.
I said 100,000.
It's page 32 of 33 in the packet.
Right,
That
92
was
a year.
provided.
767.
Yeah, if you're in your current packet, Suzanne said it's page 32 of 33 in
like
your
a-
current packet
A
for this.
$150,000 home,
$100,000, $92 a year increase.
yes, 138 for 150,000.
my math.
92 for $100,000.
We like details too.
So, are we just, I'm looking at the cuts, and I don't see, I don't think we can, but I mean, I don't know if we'd even entertain it, and that is Health Ministries is not listed on here.
It's included.
It was already included, yeah. This is just
But
the
yeah, right,
increased
But as
costs.
far as cuts are concerned.
Correct. No,
We
we
did
did
not
not talk
cut
about
it.
health
That's what I
ministry,
said.
yeah.
So we're cutting the senior center of everything they requested.
And again, these are your options and choices. You guys can take them or leave them. It just affects the bottom line, so we need some assistance from you on these things.
And what was the request for fire and EMS? The total request for positions?
It was 6,
601.
Yeah, but as far as positions.
positions.
Six.
and that would be certified officers that are either EMT/paramedics/firefighters, a combination there of.
And that is going to be applied one per shift, or how do you think that would affect you operationally, Chief?
The proposed cut?
Yes.
Yes, we would, instead of 2 per shift, we would be looking at 1 per shift increase. Yes, sir.
He said, we talked to him about whether that would be better or if it would 2 for 3 years. But
Right.
it'd be easier to work him in his shifts if he had 3 and 3.
3 1 year,
This
3
year
the
and
next
3
year.
next year, sorry, yeah.
If we just added 2 for 1 year, then you have a unequal.
Right, and I didn't know how that would work for you, and you know your business more than anybody else in this room, so that's why I wanted to hear from you how it would work. Thank you.
That would be our intent at this point.
Okay.
I really hate seeing the environmental inspector go, because I've really been,
That's an additional position
That's
though,
the
right?
additional. We
But it's-
would retain the current position.
right, but you have it here as a cut. You were going to add another inspector, is that right? Mm-hmm. So you're taking that out.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's what I'm saying. Really
We've-
hate to see that go, because we've needed that for a long time.
These are difficult decisions, I know. We don't.
Well,
often
we're
do
asking
things
more of
lightly.
the citizens if we're even considering a mill levy increase, so we, I think, also in turn need to ask more of our staff. And if that is deal without the extra position, then, that is what it is.
Well, our citizens are going to deal with that loss of that position, because then we're just going to end up fielding more questions, more complaints about those issues that we already have too many of. And so we have to be willing to do that. We have to be willing to say, it's just going to be this way because we made cuts.
difficult decisions.
Suzanne, the park, oh,
Just give them Clint's number.
He's already got one call tonight.
the park building maintenance, is that for the new building that we'll be getting from the state? Is that what that park building maintenance?
Yes,
Okay,
That's a one-time,
it's a
correct.
one-time,
Totally
one-year
worth
deal.
making sure it's in the budget. I just wanted to make sure, make sure I understood it correctly.
because if you
One of the
remember, we
thing,
looked at that new building for 4 million, and we'd had to bond that for years, and
oh, yeah, no,
such
this
a
is
saving
a slam
grace.
dunk deal.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a
this
big
is-
deal.
This is,
It's amazing.
I was just wondering, and I don't know who this person is or if there even is a person, but the unfilled position on the management analyst, that's 59,000. I recognize the need for that, but Kathy, with the environmental inspector being that 19,000, I mean, that's only from the general budget. The rest of it's coming out of sanitation and wastewater, which is 70%. If, I don't know how important that position is to keep in there this year, if we can allocate those
already
funds
exist.
elsewhere. It already
They
exists.
already exist. It was just going, you all had authorized it as a part-time position for this budget year.
Okay.
That person's already here about 30-ish hours a week, I think, right now. But that would be our request is, and that's, again, I know we've had these discussions, but if there are other people watching, again, in tightening our belts over the last 4 or 5 years, we left a lot of previously filled positions. We had a management analyst, but he has been gone for 5 years, and we just didn't refill the position. So does that help a little bit?
Yeah,
So
it does.
that's why it says unfilled. It's not necessarily
Okay.
new.
I thought that was, okay. I
Yeah,
thought that
I'm
was
sorry.
it.
I did not
That's
word
okay.
that well.
Yeah,
Apologize for the confusion.
that's okay.
We're just saying it would have a full-time impact next year versus it was like a half-time impact
Okay,
this year.
thank you. All right, I thought that was somebody that did not exist and we were adding that.
No, they
Okay.
do exist. Yes.
Is there any way the environmental inspector can be fully funded across the sanitation and wastewater? As in, focused on those types of inspections only?
I'm going to defer to these two on that because there are some legalities about what projects they
Right.
work on and what their funding comes from. So.
But if you,
Yeah.
So,
and I guess it doesn't have to be.
I think we've stretched it as is, because some of the complaints are related to water and/or wastewater and/or trash, but some are related to more just general items. We have to be able to pass the sniff test on these things that we charged off to these revenue accounts when our auditors are looking at it. And so
course.
it's not unlike, say, my position where a portion is split out amongst those. This position gets split out, and
We really
I
want
think
the
we've
public
stretched it here.
to trust us when we say we are paid, 50% here and 30% there, because they really work that much. We've kind of narrowed it down. We don't want them to get to thinking, oh, you just shoved it in there. So I can see what you're saying, but we'd like to keep it pretty above board, so.
Well, I didn't know the volume of work,
Yeah.
if there was a higher volume of work that could justify that, then, you would hone that position within that department, and you wouldn't par it out across multiple departments. And that was my question.
Yeah,
Is there enough work for one of those positions to live where it's supporting?
so the current environmental inspector, is his about the same as far
Yes.
as the distribution? Okay, and when I think of environmental inspector, I think of all the things that I see, that I hear about. And,
Code enforcement.
yes.
And that's,
Housing
Kind of.
code,
And in
housing
a
code.
community of roughly 19,000, with just one inspector, it's never going to get up to where it should be. And we've been dealing with that for a long time.
and recall that was a policy decision that your predecessors made, is that we would basically go on a complaint basis versus going out. And there are some communities who have multiple officers that literally go out and patrol
Search 'em.
a section of the city every single day.
Yes.
We do not do that. When we get a call, it is, what am I saying, Suzanne? Not activated, but initiated by the called
By
complaint.
complaints.
And then when we do get there, we make sure we take a look at the entire block, just to be fair, and anything on that whole block or within a certain area, we will make sure we, notify everybody that here are those issues to be remediated.
And we've even started, just to try and stretch that, major issues on that block
Yeah.
as opposed to every issue. And this is one of those items that has been on the list multiple times over the last several years. And, you know, when you're getting ready to add more staff, it does fall under scrutiny, but like Donna said, we want to be real honest with everybody. Show it out here and see how everything falls.
Just do our best to be as transparent as possible.
So there would be a negligible reduction in health insurance and HR and all that because we're looking at 4 fewer positions, right?
Overall, oh, correct,
Oh, you
yes,
mean for
yes,
the-
yes, so
Yeah,
like, Donna
was
has,
included in
that is
here.
all included in
That's
those numbers.
included in the-
Yeah, so like the $600,000 for fire EMS, for example, that is salaries, benefits,
Okay.
insurance, all the good stuff all together.
Yeah, I put all those together.
And the increase in the FICA, Medicare, health insurance, all that's for the existing positions.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct, sir.
And so equipment reserve, the reserves, that takes them down to, did you say earlier, 0?
No,
No,
this
no,
is
no,
what
no.
the increases were.
Contribution.
A zero increase from previous years, yes.
So we're keeping the same as they were this year. We're not going up.
And what happens when we start looking at all the departments, they look at their equipment reserve when we go through the budget process, and it changes all throughout the year. We're always, as we're purchasing equipment, let's just say we're looking at a flatbed pickup truck, and its time has come for it to go from this organization. When we purchase a new one, we have a dollar amount that's plugged in for the purchase year. And if we aren't purchasing it that year, it gets moved. It gets moved out in time. The year that we do purchase, then the dollar amount that it cost us to purchase gets plugged in. And then it's moved out, whether it's a 10, 15, however many years it is that thing's going to last. We think it's going to last based on what we've seen in the past. That's where we plug it into that future year. But so then what happens is you start seeing the bottom line with all of this equipment because the price to purchase today is different than it was 15 years ago. And so those costs go up, and so the bottom line in the equipment reserve is higher than it was. So that means we need to add a little bit more in each year from each of our departments so that when we get it 15 years out, that dollar amount's high enough to be able to buy all that equipment. And what we're saying here is we've pulled out those dollars that we increased so that we'll be able to purchase in outer years, which is why Donna's saying in the next year budget, we need to put that back in because we know there's some things that we need to
Because
purchase.
it's 6 or 7 years out where we might be seeing the negative amount in that fund. But we got to start putting a little bit of save. That's what you save for. You put a little bit each year.
We try to put a little away.
Yeah.
So do you put an inflation factor in, like if something costs 50,000 now and you're gonna replace it in 10 years, do you estimate it to be?
Most of the guys put about
70,000
3% in.
On some things, yes. I mean, remember, this has everything from, like, a big pump at the wastewater treatment plant to.
The breathing apparatuses for the fire department. They're
Yeah,
all-
and their big trucks, and then the emergency warning sirens that are out there. There's everything in between. I use the example of a pickup truck because that's easy
You're
for people to
projecting what
visualize.
you think the cost will be and you're plugging that number in.
And if we do happen to sell it for money, we put that money right back in the,
It goes
Back to
back
MER.
into the
Into the MERP.
MER.
Right.
That makes sense. Yeah. Inflation's gonna be really a big deal.
it is.
Like you said, on the police cars.
It's frightening to me.
Yeah.
If we can even get
It's
them.
scary.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, and, you know, something like a police car, we get that question a lot. Okay, well, why can't you just go buy a pickup truck? Why? But no, I mean,
you ride
it
a
has
horse?
to be
About a
intertwined.
fully equipped Yugo.
I have
How about
only
a
been,
horse?
I've only been halfway teasing Chief lately that if we can't get cars, we might have to start a motors unit because we got to have the officers out there somehow.
So what we need to do tonight then is decide what we want to publish for that rate.
Yes, sir.
Is this just a simple motion?
Correct, yeah. You just need to tell us how many mills we are adding. Like, tell us and we'll plug in the proper number.
And I guess kind of what I was saying earlier is I would like to see us not go above, I mean, I would like to see us not publish anything that we know we're not going to go above anyway. So if 8 is the max for everybody, I would like to see us not publish anything higher than that, just for the sense that I don't want to give any of our citizens heartburn over something we're not going to do anyways. If we're not going to go to 12, then I don't know why we would publish 12, but,
Yeah.
I mean, if 8's our max, let's publish 8. That's my opinion. I don't want to throw something out there to our citizens and then not, if we know we're not going to do it anyways.
Would you like for me to pull back here? This is the 8. Again, I know it's a little hard. If you need me to read some of the small text, let me know.
But they have copies in front of them.
Sure,
too,
oh,
I think.
yes, correct, sorry.
So at 8 mills, the mill would be, it's 70.506 total. Right now, it's 62 for all 5 funds. It would be with your 8 mill increase.
70.506.
And
Okay,
that's all in the general fund. We're not changing in the other funds.
Yeah.
But if
so
we did-
I was looking at these cuts and, okay, so couple of things. I really, really hate cutting the reserves when you're just going to have to turn right around next year and put them back in. And I will say that we haven't had any, well, let me just put it this way. It will probably be pretty brutal, honestly, to the senior center to cut entirely everything without any kind of conversation with them. And if we eventually want to get back to where we have been, we need to do it in shortcuts. And I added back in half of that from the senior center, and then I added back in the equipment reserves, and that's basically takes it at 9 mills. If you takes it down to right about 3 mills. I'm just offering that as an, consideration, because again, if we're going to turn around next year and put this money in the reserves, we're going to be right back in the same spot. Do we want to hit it now, or are we going to wait and?
Well, if we didn't do anything, didn't have any increases next year, we'd have to go up 3 mills just to maintain the 5%.
Yes, sir.
I mean, that's like a given. So, so I'm just looking at the chart here this fine gentleman brought in, and there's a story for each year what happened. And I think this probably signifies what happens to community when they experience no growth. Yeah, I mean, if you take a look at your abatement schedule that you had here, that's not the amount of taxes that comes on, that's the amount of property that was abated. And in 10 years, we've abated $1 million, which means we've had no economic development activity whatsoever. Is that a fair statement? I mean,
Well,
we've captured some economic development without offering
Our
tax
existing,
abatements.
our existing companies have been the one that's kind of
our
grown.
existing companies have expanded quite a bit over the last
But
few
ours-
years.
So
But
that
new ones.
shows you what happens if you don't have any growth, then you have to raise your mill levy every year just to cover inflation.
yes, well, and part of the struggle too was, we're attacking this problem very strategically at you all's behest, but, when these larger companies come in that are going to bring a couple hundred employees at a time, we have no place for them to live.
That's
So
true.
we're missing out on that, and so we're working on housing, and again, that's really us being a partner and a catalyst for those things, because those are private developments, but it is going to increase valuation over time overall.
Right, right.
You are
So we're betting on the come, but it's a better bet all the time because we have things in the works and that's going to happen. So the trick then is financing growth when you're going to be abating a lot of stuff. Then you have to hope that like right now we have 400 to 500 rooftops that are on the table that look like they're going to come. If we could get, if the supply chain would cooperate, you'd see some buildings going up out in the industrial park right now.
Correct.
To my knowledge, I don't think we've had any of those ask for tax abatements yet, have we?
Not yet. Typically, they would come, and that might be through, if they might ask for industrial revenue bonds, IRBs, and sometimes that comes
Then
along
they
with
would
the
get it
property tax too.
automatically.
Yeah, they
So,
can.
I mean, one of the byproducts of not growing over a period of time is that when you do grow, it is going to be painful. because you have to provide the infrastructure, and certainly you got to gear up employee-wise to cover that growth. And were we not to budget for some of that right now, then you know, we wouldn't be able to afford to offer quality services in certain areas when that growth happens. So you know, I mean, I hope it's obvious to the citizens that we aren't just picking a number and saying, yeah, let's go with that. I mean, we've spent hundreds of hours, you know, looking at numbers, looking at budgets, talking about things, changing the MER, you know, calculating returns on investment, and I think there's no doubt that we're headed in the right direction. But you know, I mean, we've sharpened our pencils as much as we can. I think the fact that we really do kind of need 12 mills to really put us in a really good position, and we're willing to cut down to 8. I mean, that's to ask you guys to do more than that. You know, it really, I don't want to say it's unfair, but certainly it's asking, you know, a lot more than we should be asking, I think, at this point in time. And like I said last time, you know, it's like any company that goes through a growth cycle. You know, you have to finance that growth with something, and cities only have a certain number of places to get it from, and I think the taxpayers of Harvey County, or at least City of Newton, I hope they're getting comfortable with the fact that we take this really seriously, and we wouldn't ask for this if it wasn't necessary. But I do want it to be in the record that at some point in time, when all this valuation goes on, instead of looking at a number here of $1,035,195 worth of abated economic development projects, that number could be $300 million over the next 10 years. That's a big deal. And to think that we can keep the mill levy the same and cover all that, I mean, you know, we have to come in here with fire extinguishers to put your hair will be on fire, and certainly we don't want that to happen. But anyway, I'm going to be very supportive of 8 mills, and I think we've done our job if we come in at 8 mills. After knowing we really need 12 mills, we're betting on the come, but I expect to see an increase in valuation next year too, both from new construction. You know, what, about 27-28% of our increase in valuation from last year to this year was from new construction, and that's a good thing. And I would expect that maybe 40 to 50% of our increase in valuation for 2023 for the 2024 budget will be from new construction. That's a good thing. We've done our jobs when we can say that. So anyway, I'll be supporting probably 8 mills.
I would also like to add to that next year at this time, I don't think there'll be any doubt that there'll be structures coming up out of the ground to support some of what we're doing this year and what we'll have to do next year again, instead of, because I know there's naysayers that want to say, yeah, you guys have been saying this for so many years, what's happening? There's still bare dirt out there. And next year at this time, because I know there's some building material that's already ordered, well, there's a number of them that are ordered, and so there'll be activity. There'll be physical things that people can drive by and see and point to and say, yep, that's happening now. So I think that will be a good backup for what we're doing here and what's coming in the future. Yeah, it is painful. It is, but I think everybody involved has really done a fine job, and so anyways, I guess I would be in favor of laying a motion out there to increase the mills to 70.506.
Okay, there's a motion.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. We'll go ahead and vote on that unless there's any further discussion that anybody would like to have.
I will add, I'm willing to vote for that, but I do want to say I'll vote for that with grief, especially on cutting reserves and explaining to the senior center people that they're just not going to get anything this year. And
We will continue to work on a way to figure.
I know, I'm not, and I will say too, I regret that 3 positions have to be cut from fire and EMS, because that just means that puts us back that much further from the discussions that we've had with regard to increasing and future station, another station, being able to handle the calls that we need to call. This just puts us back from doing that.
Well, for word clarification, I don't think we're cutting 3 positions. We're not adding 3 new positions.
Well,
We're not cutting any
you had-
positions from the current fire department. We're not adding,
Right.
we're only adding 3 of the 6 we were going to add.
Right, but
Okay.
we are cutting 3 of those 6, and that was intended, my understanding was to put us more toward what we were thinking about in the future.
Correct, but existing positions we're not cutting.
Right, exactly. So, but I will go along with the 8.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. All those in favor of the 70.506 mill increase, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign? Aye. All right. Item number 2 tonight is an executive session. Do we have in that, Chris?
Yeah, if we could. I've got a quick motion. I think we could wrap it up in 20 minutes, maybe reconvene at 6:25. Would not anticipate any further action after that, only to end this special setting and then reconvene at 7 o'clock for your regular
Okay.
scheduled meeting.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Someone like to make a motion?
I move that the city commission recess into executive session to receive legal advice from counsel. The justification for closing the meeting is to consult with city attorney to discuss matters privileged under attorney-client relationship. Time and place at which the open meeting shall resume is 6:27, right?
That's great.
Here in City Hall and Commission Chambers.
Second.
All right, the motion and second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, same side.
Kathy does that so well.
I wasn't paying attention, so I didn't know how much time you wanted.
Yes, that's.
Dinner break.